Unfortunately, you can't talk about the family today without talking about divorce and its ever-growing consequence, custody battles. We want to look at perhaps the newest problem to ensnare parents, children, lawyers, and judges in our family courts. What we're talking about is spiritual custody. In other words, which parent in an interfaith family determines the children's religion. The most famous case of this right now is in Denver, Colorado, where a mother received a suspended jail sentence for taking her children to a Catholic Mass. Gerald Sims, the father, is Jewish. He is accompanied by his lawyer, Ed Huttner. Also with us is Rabbi Stephen Foster, who played a major role in this case. Cynthia Green is a Miami lawyer who has tried to persuade the Supreme Court to rule on religion as a factor in custody cases. Let me start with you, if I can, Jerry, because you are the central player here, and along with your former wife. Give us a sense of what happened and why, and then we'll get into what the rabbi said and also why Cynthia thinks this is a good or bad precedent in the making.
Okay, really good. I'd like to thank you, for the opportunity when this became such a media attention case, as exhibited in the Sunday New York Times of last weekend. I decided it would be appropriate to talk about it. It was a very personal matter. But at your introduction, you talked about how interfaith marriages can have some repercussions that are unfortunate. This was really not an interfaith marriage at all. Duffy and I, of course, as young lovers,
Duffy being your wife.
Yes, name of endearment. She goes by Duffy. Met, fell in love, were engaged. Prior to our marriage, Duffy found a closeness in my religion and in my family, and she had fallen away from her previous religion of Catholicism. She wanted to convert to the Jewish faith. She wanted to for two reasons. She wanted our children, if we had children subsequently after our marriage, to have one religion only, and also because of the closeness she saw in our Jewish faith that she unfortunately had fallen away from in her own. She went through a very lengthy conversion process, made some commitments about rearing a Jewish family. We did subsequently have two daughters, began to raise them in that Jewish religion.
And she was a practicing Jew, in
yes,
the sense,
absolutely.
in the best sense of that word.
Absolutely. And that was the lifestyle that we enjoyed. It was not an interfaith marriage at that point. It was a Jewish marriage. Our children were born. They were Jewish. We began to raise them at the early age of introducing religion into their lives in that one Jewish religion. When our marriage soured for various reasons, Duffy had come home one New Year's Eve between 85 and 86. We knew we were having some marital problems, indicated that Judaism was not something she wanted to be a part of anymore, and I indicated to her that was fine. As an adult, her theological position is wide open to whichever she chooses. Her social lifestyle, I knew that she had some things going on in her life that were not involved with me anymore. And those were all fine in my position for her. But when it came to the choosing of now a different religion for our children, I steadfastly indicated to her that was really not negotiable. They were Jewish kids, and that's what they were to remain.
Did she want to choose a different religion for them, or simply expose them to other religions, principally Catholicism, the religion that she was going back to?
She wanted to she said to me she felt that they could be raised in both religions. And first of all, I said that there's no reason to raise them in both religions. These are Jewish children. And there's no reason now to raise them in both.
You participated in the hearings. What did you say that made a difference?
Well, not being the judge, I don't know what persuaded the judge.
But, okay, but give us your speech.
I think that there were a number of issues that I tried to raise with the court. One was the commitment that Duffy had at the time of her conversion to a real Jewish lifestyle, and I don't think that there was any question about that, and I don't think the court questioned the fact that she had converted to Judaism and wanted to live Jewishly. The second issue, and more importantly, I think, is the issue of can you raise a child in two different religions?
Let me interrupt only because I want this understood. We're now talking about a hearing to determine custody.
No, we're talking. Yeah, the court case of a little over a year ago
to determine
custody.
Right.
I was asked to testify.
Okay, I just hadn't mentioned that. I wanted to make sure
as an expert
audience
witness on the issue of religion and so on. And My concern as it began to unfold was the fact that Duffy felt that she could raise her children in two different religions. Now, I think Duffy has a respect, and I think she continues to have a respect for Jewish life. I don't think she has become an anti-religious person in terms of Judaism. But she believed that you could raise children with two religions and then kind of give them the chance to choose for themselves as they become adults. And my position is that you can't take two different worldviews. It's not just a matter of celebrating Christmas and Hanukkah. If that's all we're talking about, hey, let's everybody be everything and we can just all have a great time. But we're talking about worldviews and what is ultimate and of ultimate concern to us as individuals. If that is the case, that the worldviews of Catholicism and Judaism are different, then it's hard, it seems to me, to raise them as both in order for them to make a choice. How can you, on the one hand, refer to a religious tradition and put all of your effort into a religious tradition that speaks to afterlife being most important as opposed to this world being most important?
For those reasons, you testified on behalf of something that we now know as spiritual custody.
Correct.
That these two children could have a life with the divorced mother. Their ages 5 and 7, Lauren and Rachel, 5 and 7, and at the same time, spiritually, be raised Jewish and
I didn't argue for that. That might have
been the result, but that's not
that's
what you
the result. But that
all
was
you
not my
argued for
argument.
was let these children be raised
in the religion in which they had been born, and not to confuse these children by saying we can raise them in both.
And the final decision was?
The court's decision was that physical custody would be granted to the mother, but spiritual custody, religious custody, would be granted to the father.
Cynthia Green is a minor lawyer. She has some ideas about this, and we'll hear those when we come back. Stay with us.
Here is CBS News correspondent Charlie Rose.
We are back. You have listened to this. What do you think?
I think two things. You know, it seems that in this country, our society is based on diversity. We teach our children both sides of just about everything you can think of. We teach them every theory of evolution or the creation of the world that's ever been devised by anyone. We teach them every theory of democracy versus communism. And it's only this area where our courts or our people seem to think that you cannot allow them to hear two views, that it'll harm them in some way. I think our courts are not supposed to get into these issues under separation of church and state, under everything we know in the Constitution, unless someone is saying that there's going to be a harm to the child. Our judges are allowed to protect children from harm, but they're not permitted to choose between Catholicism and Judaism, or Judaism and anything else, or Catholicism and anything else. So therefore you believe that religious preference should never be at issue in a custody decision? Religious preference should never, I agree, never be at issue unless there is a practice, a religious practice, not a belief, a practice that is detrimental to the physical welfare of the child. Snake handling, running in cars on I-95 because you believe that if God loves you, he won't kill you. Right. That can be an issue, and that could be an issue whether it's religion or not. If you run in cars on I-95 because it's fun, they will stop you, or they'll stop you from taking your child. But if you don't show harm to a child from a practice, I do not believe under our Constitution that this should ever be in the courts. I know Ed Huttner wants to speak to this, but don't you have some empathy for the father here who was married, his wife had converted to Judaism, and he believed that his children would be raised Jewish, and now they're living with a mother. He doesn't have custody, but he has spiritual custody, and he believed and was assured at every step that his children would be raised Jewish, and it means something to him, it means something to his faith. Isn't it unfair now to say that might not happen, and doesn't that violate his own expectation? I have a great deal of empathy for him in that respect. However, I haven't heard that anyone has said that the children cannot continue to be raised Jewish. He has that responsibility. He's chosen that responsibility, and he wants to do it. And I haven't heard anything here that says that's not going to continue to happen. What I have heard is that they are to be raised Jewish and not learn of any other religion or belief other than that. And I don't think that the Jewish faith says that You can be raised Jewish and learn about every other faith. What is more harmful?
There's a big difference. There's a big difference between talking about raising a child as in a religious tradition and exposing them to philosophies and understandings. We're not talking about saying to this child or these children that they can't learn about what it means for their mother to be a Catholic. We're not saying that they can't be taught with respect about the Catholic Church. My children, who are certainly raised as Jews, know a great deal about other religions.
Are you saying they can't go to Mass?
My children might even go to Mass with a friend of theirs, but not be participatory. But when you take a child on a daily basis to Mass, because mother goes to Mass, and mother is a participant, and mother takes communion, it would seem to me that the children want to be participants.
But the real question, Rabbi, is what's more harmful? Isn't it, in fact, more harmful for these children to be ordered to live with their mother, knowing that there's something that she believes that they're not allowed to know about, and knowing
nobody said they're not allowed to know about it.
They're not allowed to go to Mass with her, even non-participatory.
Jerry?
I think the issue is here, I would want my children to know a lot about what their mom does. That's very, very important in family life. We want to maintain the continuity of love. We're talking about a faith, not an academic knowledge of comparative religions. And when we had a situation of a lady that had been of one religion, fell away from that religion, converted to another religion, fell away from that conversion, now goes back to the first religion on a daily basis, every day. I look at that, that history, and I'm saying for my children to be participants in daily Mass is much more than knowledge. That's creating a different faith from what they were raised, at their inception.
Let me make this point. We were unable to get Dusty to be here, but we do know that she and her lawyer have made 3 arguments, and I'd like to put these on the table. 1, that she is not seeking to baptize the children or enroll them in church classes, nor asking them to dismiss Judaism. She tells them to cherish their Jewish heritage. 2, she only wants to expose the children to both religions, as many interfaith couples do, and let them decide for themselves. 3, the court, she says, cannot prohibit a parent and child from going to worship. It's unconstitutional and violates the right of freedom to associate for parent and child.
I would like to speak to those issues. Those are the same arguments that she presented very beautifully and very articulately to Judge Lawson. That was her position in court, and it hasn't changed. The judge made a ruling. The ruling was in the best interest of the children, hearing 2 different philosophies on how to handle the religious issue, that it was better to raise them in one instead of 2. This was not a choice of religion. This was a choice between how to raise the children, and the judge was convinced by Rabbi Foster's testimony that trying to raise them in 2 religions is harmful. Just that simple. And what she's saying and her position today is the same in court, but the judge ruled that that was not best for the children, and then once the judge does that, you either appeal the ruling or you obey it. And when she went to church every single day, we're not talking about Jerry prohibiting her from exposing them in some ways to the Catholic religion, that she was taking the children to church every single morning at 8 o'clock.
Jerry, in your heart, do you believe that Duffy wants these children to be Catholic?
I believe she wants them to be Catholic, but I'm not sure that she really understands that since they're Jewish and this exposing them to both is going to interfere in their having a faith in either one. And that's what I wanted to prevent.
And at heart, you believe it will, that it's impossible to be pulled in different directions.
There is this whole notion that someone wants their children to be Catholic or Jewish, but not exclusively so. And that gives rise in interfaith marriages to this notion that children are going to make decisions as children for things that adults can't make decisions for. We're going to kind of throw this to the kids, and then they'll make their decision when they get older. That they can be both. One cannot be a Catholic and a Jew at the same time. That doesn't mean that one cannot learn about Catholicism or Judaism, but you can't be both. You have to make some choices.
I'll give you the last word.
I think that you can know about both. I don't hear in this case any evidence that she's actually trying to turn these children into Catholics.
But she's taking them to Mass every day?
She's taking them to Mass.
Well, she quit doing it, but she was.
And their father is taking them to synagogue, presumably. And I think that, and it would take me longer than I have to tell you why I believe that is not harmful.
And that you can, in fact, be exposed to both religions and even participate to a degree, and at the same time remain